Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udire. And now for my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and to all the assembled devotees. Vansha kalpatarubhascha, kripa sindhave evacha, patitanam pavanebhyo, vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. We're going to take up our reading of the 6th canto. Just a slight break we had between the last reading and now. 9 months or something. But Divyanam Prabhu remembered which verse we were on, so we'll take up there. 6:142. Correct?
Yes. It's actually Ravi Prabhu who has me reminded that.
Way to go, Ravi Prabhu. 6:142. Topic is Ajamila. The sun, fire, sky, air, demigods, moon, evening, day, night, directions, water, land, and Supersoul himself all witness the activities of the living entity. Purport: the members of some religious sects, especially Christians, do not believe in the reactions of karma. We once had a discussion with a learned Christian professor who argued that although people are generally punished after the witnesses of their misdeeds are examined, where are the witnesses responsible for one suffering the reactions of past karma? To such a person, the answer by the Yamadutas is given here. A conditioned soul thinks that he is working stealthily and that no one can see his sinful activities. But we can understand from the Shastras that there are many witnesses, including the sun, fire, sky, air, moon, demigods, evening, day, night, directions, water, land, and the Supersoul himself, who sits with the individual soul within the heart. Where is the dearth of witnesses? The witnesses and the Supreme Lord both exist, and therefore so many living entities are elevated to higher planetary systems or degraded to lower planetary systems, including the hellish planets. There are no discrepancies, for everything is arranged perfectly by the management of the Supreme God. Sobhaviki jnana bala kriya cha. The witnesses mentioned in this verse are also mentioned in other Vedic literatures. Aditya Chandravino Nalascha, Dyar Bhumir Apo Hridayam Yamascha, Ahascha Ratrishcha Ube Cha Sandhye, Dharmo Pi Janati Narasya Vratam. Text 43. The candidates for punishment are those who are confirmed by these many witnesses to have deviated from their prescribed regulative duties. Everyone engaged in fruitive activities is suitable to be subjected to punishment according to his sinful acts. 44. O inhabitants of Vaikuntha, you are sinless, but those within this material world are all karmis, whether acting piously or impiously. Both kinds of action are possible for them because they are contaminated by the 3 modes of nature and must act accordingly. One who has accepted a material body cannot be inactive, and sinful action is inevitable for one acting under the modes of material nature. Therefore, all the living entities within this material world are punishable. Purport: the difference between human beings and non-human beings is that a human is supposed to act according to the directions of the Vedas. Unfortunately, men manufacture their own ways of acting without reference to the Vedas. Therefore, all of them commit sinful actions and are punishable. 45. In proportion to the extent of one's religious or irreligious actions in this life, one must enjoy or suffer the corresponding reactions of his karma in the next. Purport: As stated in Bhagavad Gita 14:18, Urdvam gachanti sattvastha madhye tishtanti rajasa jaganya gunavrittista ado gachanti tamasa. Those who act in the mode of goodness are promoted to higher planetary systems to become demigods. Those who act in an ordinary way and do not commit excessively sinful acts remain within this middle planetary system, and those who perform abominable sinful actions must go down to hellish life. 46. O best of the demigods, we can see 3 different varieties of life, which are due to the contamination of the 3 modes of nature. The living entities are thus known as peaceful, restless, and foolish, as happy, unhappy, or in between, or as religious, irreligious, and semi-religious. We can deduce that in the next life, these 3 kinds of material nature will similarly act. Purport. The actions and reactions of the 3 modes of material nature are visible in this life. For example, some people are very happy, some are very distressed, and some are in mixed happiness and distress. This is the result of past association with the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Since these varieties are visible in this life, we may assume that the living entities, according to their association with the different modes of material nature, will be happy, distressed, or between the 2 in their next lives also. Therefore, the best policy is to disassociate oneself from the 3 modes of material nature and be always transcendental to their contamination. This is possible only when one fully engages in the devotional service of the Lord. As Krishna confirms in Bhagavad Gita 14:26, Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan pramabhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down under any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the spiritual platform. Unless one is fully absorbed in the service of the Lord, one is subject to the contamination of the 3 modes of material nature and must therefore suffer from distress or mixed happiness and distress. 47. Just as springtime in the present indicates the nature of springtimes in the past and future, so this life of happiness, distress, or a mixture of both gives evidence concerning the religious and irreligious activities of one's past and future lives. Purport. Our past and future are not very difficult to understand, for time is under the contamination of the 3 modes of material nature. As soon as spring arrives, the usual exhibition of various types of fruits and flowers automatically becomes manifest. And therefore we may conclude that spring in the past was adorned with similar fruits and flowers, and will be so adorned in the future also. Our repetition of birth and death is taking place within time, and according to the influence of the modes of nature, we are receiving various types of bodies and being subjected to various conditions. Text number 48. The omnipotent Yamaraj is as good as Lord Brahma, for while situated in his own abode, or in everyone's heart like the Paramatma, he mentally observes the past activities of a living entity, and thus understands how the living entity will act in future lives. Purport. One should not consider Yamaraj an ordinary living being. He is as good as Lord Brahma. He has the complete cooperation of the Supreme Lord, who is situated in everyone's heart, and therefore by the grace of the Supersoul, he can see the past, present, and future of a living being from within. The word anu-mimāsate, bimamsate, means that he can decide in consultation with the Supersoul. Anu means following. The actual decisions concerning the next lives of the living entities are made by the Supersoul, and they are carried out by Yamaraj. Text 49. As a sleeping person acts according to the body, manifested in his dreams and accepts it to be himself, so one identifies with his present body, which he acquired because of his past religious or irreligious actions, and is unable to know his past or present lives. I'll read that again. As a sleeping person acts according to the body manifested in his dreams and accepts it to be himself, so one identifies with his present body, which he acquired because of his past religious or irreligious actions, and is unable to know his past or future lives. Purport. A man engages in sinful activities because he does not know what he did in his past life to get his present materially conditioned body, which is subjected to the threefold miseries. As stated by Rishabhadeva in Srimad Bhagvatam 554, Nunam pramata kurate vikarma, a human being who is mad after sense gratification does not hesitate to act sinfully, yadindriya pritaya apranoti. He performs sinful actions simply for sense gratification. Nasadu manye, this is not good. Yata atmano yam asan apikleshada asadeha. Because of such sinful actions, one receives another body in which to suffer as he is suffering in his present body because of his past sinful activities. It should be understood that a person who does not have Vedic knowledge always acts in ignorance of what he has done in the past, what he is doing at the present, and how he will suffer in the future. He is completely in darkness. Therefore, the Vedic injunction is, tamasi ma, don't remain in darkness, jyotir gama. Try to go to the light. The light or illumination is Vedic knowledge, which one can understand when he is elevated to the mode of goodness, or when he transcends the mode of goodness by engaging in devotional service to the spiritual master and the Supreme Lord. This is described in the Shrutashvatara Upanishad. Yasya devi para bhaktir yata devi tata garau tasyaite katita yarta prakashante mahatmanaha. Unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master, all the imports of Vedic knowledge are automatically revealed. The Vedas enjoin tad vignanartam sagarum ibabigach. One must approach a spiritual master who has full knowledge of the Vedas and be faithfully directed by him in order to become a devotee of the Lord. Then the knowledge of the Vedas will be revealed. When the Vedic knowledge is revealed, one need no longer remain in the darkness of material nature. According to his association with the material modes of nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, a living entity gets a particular type of body. The example of one who associates with the mode of goodness is a qualified brahmana. Such a brahmana knows past, present, and future because he consults the Vedic literature and sees through the eyes of Shastra, Shastra Chakshu. He can understand what his past life was, why he is in the present body, and how he can obtain liberation from the clutches of Maya and not accept another material body. This is all possible when one is situated in the mode of goodness. Generally, however, the living entities are engrossed in the modes of passion and ignorance. In any case, one receives an inferior or superior body at the discretion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Paramatma. As stated in the previous verse, Manasaiva pure deva purva rupam vipashyati anu mam sate purvam manasa bhagavan naja. Everything depends on Bhagavan or Aja, the unborn. Why doesn't one please Bhagavan to receive a better body? The answer is ajnantamasa, because of gross ignorance. One who is in complete darkness cannot know what his past life was or what his next life will be. He is simply interested in his present body. Even though he has a human body, a person in the mode of ignorance and interested only in his present body is like an animal. For an animal, being covered by ignorance, thinks that the ultimate goal of life and happiness is to eat as much as possible. A human being must be educated to understand his past life and how he can endeavor for a better life in the future. There is even a book called Bhrigu-samhita, which reveals information about one's past, present, and future lives according to astrological calculations. Somehow or other, one must be enlightened about his past, present, and future. One who is interested only in his present body and who tries to enjoy his senses to the fullest extent is understood to be engrossed in the mode of ignorance. His future is very, very dark. Indeed, the future is always dark for one who is grossly covered by ignorance. Especially in this age, human society is covered by the mode of ignorance, and therefore everyone thinks his present body to be everything without consideration of the past or future. Text 50. Above the 5 senses of perception, the 5 working senses and the 5 objects of the senses is the mind, which is the 16th element. Above the mind is the 17th element, the soul, the living being himself, who, in cooperation with the other 16, enjoys the material world alone. The living being enjoys 3 kinds of situations, namely happy, distressful, and mixed. Purport. Everyone engages in work with his hands, legs, and other senses, just to achieve a certain goal according to his concocted ideas. One tries to enjoy the 5 sense objects, namely form, sound, taste, aroma, and touch, not knowing the actual goal of life, which is to satisfy the Supreme Lord. Because of disobeying the Supreme Lord, one is put into material conditions. And he then tries to improve his situation in a concocted way, not desiring to follow the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nevertheless, the Supreme Lord is so kind that he comes himself to instruct the bewildered living entity how to act obediently and then gradually return home back to Godhead, where he can attain an eternal, peaceful life of bliss and knowledge. The living entity has a body which is a very complicated combination of the material elements, and with his body he struggles alone, as indicated in this verse by the words ekas tu. For example, if one is struggling in the ocean, he must swim through it alone. Although many other men and aquatics are swimming in the ocean, he must take care of himself because no one else will help him. Therefore, this verse indicates that the 17th item, the soul, must work alone. Although he tries to create society, friendship, and love, no one will be able to help him but Krishna, the Supreme Lord. Therefore, his only concern should be how to satisfy Krishna. That is also what Krishna wants. Sarvadharman pratyaja, mamekam sharanam vraja. People bewildered by material conditions try to be united, but although they strive for unity among men and nations, all their attempts are futile. Everyone must struggle alone for existence with the many elements of nature. Therefore, one's only hope, as Krishna advises, is to surrender to him, for he can help one become free from the ocean of nations. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore prayed, Ainanda tanuja kinkaram, patitam mam vishame bhavam budao, kripaya tapapada pankaja, stitadhuli sadrasham vachintaya. O Krishna, beloved son of Nanda Maharaj, I am your eternal servant, but somehow or other I have fallen into this ocean of nations. And although I am struggling very hard, there's no way I can save myself. If you kindly pick me up and fix me as one of the particles of dust at your lotus feet, that will save me. In a similar way, Bhaktivinoda Thakur sang, Anadi karma phale, padi bhavarnava jali, tari bhari na teki upai. My dear Lord, I cannot remember when I somehow or other fell into this ocean of nescience, and now I can find no way to rescue myself. We should remember that everyone is responsible for his own life. If an individual becomes a pure devotee of Krishna, he is then delivered from the ocean of nescience. 51. The subtle body is endowed with 16 parts, the 5 knowledge-acquiring senses, the 5 working senses, the 5 objects of sense gratification, and the mind. This subtle body is an effect of the 3 modes of material nature. It is composed of insurmountably strong desires, and therefore it causes the living entity to transmigrate from one body to another in human life, animal life, and life as a demigod. When the living entity gets the body of a demigod, he is certainly very jubilant. When he gets the body of a human, he is always in lamentation. And when he gets the body of an animal, he is always afraid. In all conditions, however, he is actually miserable. His miserable condition is called samsriti, or transmigration in material life. Purport. The sum and substance of material conditional life is explained in this verse. The living entity, the 17th element, could be a good name for a new bhakti club, is struggling alone, life after life. This struggle is called samsriti, or material conditional life. In Bhagavad Gita it is said that the force of material nature is insurmountably strong. Daivihi esha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya. Material nature harasses the living entity in different bodies. But if the living entity surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he becomes free from this entanglement, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Mameva ye prapadyante, mayametam tarantite. Thus, his life becomes successful. Text number 52. The foolish embodied living entity, inept at controlling his senses and mind, is forced to act according to the influence of the modes of material nature against his desires. He is like a silkworm that uses its own saliva to create a cocoon and then becomes trapped in it with no possibility of getting out. The living entity traps himself in a network of his own fruitive activities and then can find no way to release himself. Thus he is always bewildered, and repeatedly he dies. Purport. As already explained, the influence of the modes of nature is very strong. The living entity entangled in different types of fruitive activity is like a silkworm trapped in a cocoon. Getting free is very difficult unless he is helped by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 53. Not a single living entity can remain unengaged even for a moment. One must act by his natural tendency according to the 3 modes of material nature, because this natural tendency forcibly makes him work in a particular way. Purport. The swabhavika, or one's natural tendency, is the most important factor in action. One's natural tendency is to serve because a living entity is an eternal servant of God. The living entity wants to serve, but because of his forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Lord, he serves under the modes of material nature and manufactures various modes of service, such as socialism, humanitarianism, and altruism. However, one should be enlightened in the tenets of Bhagavad Gita and accept the instruction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that one give up all natural tendencies for material service under different names and take to the service of the Lord. One's original natural tendency is to act in Krishna consciousness, because one's real nature is spiritual. The duty of a human being is to understand that since he is essentially spirit, he must abide by the spiritual tendency and not be carried away by material tendencies. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has therefore sung, Miche maya raboshe jacho beshe kacho habudububai. My dear brothers, you are being carried away by the waves of material energy and are suffering in many miserable conditions. Somehow you are drowning in the waves of material nature, and sometimes you are drowning in the waves of material nature, and sometimes you are tossed like a swimmer struggling in the ocean. As confirmed by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this tendency to be battered by the waves of Maya can be changed to one's original natural tendency, which is spiritual. When the living entity comes to understand that he is eternally Krishna Das, a servant of God, Krishna. Jeev Krishna Das, e Bishwas Koleto Artukonai. Instead of serving Maya under different names, one turns his service attitude toward the Supreme Lord. He is then safe and there is no more difficulty. If one returns to his original natural tendency in the human form of life by understanding the perfect knowledge given by Krishna himself in the Vedic literature, one's life is successful. 54. Everyone okay?
Yes.
Way better than okay. The fruit of activities a living being performs, whether pious or impious, are the unseen cause for the fulfillment of his desires. This unseen cause is the root for the living entity's different bodies. Because of his intense desire, the living entity takes birth in a particular family and receives a body which is either like that of his mother or like that of his father. The gross and subtle bodies are created according to his desire. Purport. The gross body is a product of the subtle body, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 8.6. Yang vapi smaran bhavam tajatyante kalevaram tam evaiti kaunteya satatad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. The atmosphere of the subtle body at the time of death is created by the activities of the gross body. Thus, the gross body acts during one's lifetime, and the subtle body acts at the time of death. The subtle body, which is called linga, the body of desire, is the background for the development of a particular type of gross body, which is either like that of one's mother or like that of one's father. According to the Rig Veda, if at the time of sex the secretions of the mother are more profuse than those of the father, the child will receive a female body. And if the secretions of the father are more profuse than those of the mother, the child will receive a male body. These are the subtle laws of nature which act according to the desire of the living entity. If a human being is taught to change his subtle body by developing a consciousness of Krishna, at the time of death, the subtle body will create a gross body in which he will be a devotee of Krishna. Or, if he is still more perfect, he will not take another material body, but will immediately get a spiritual body and thus return home back to Godhead. This is the process of the transmigration of the soul. Therefore, instead of trying to unite human society through pacts for sense gratification that can never be achieved, it is clearly desirable to teach people how to become Krishna conscious and return home back to Godhead. This is true now and indeed at any time. And I will take a few reflections or questions. Yes? We'll give you a mic for free. Thrown in.
He was saying that the desires are so strong that even though the living entity doesn't want to commit sinful activities, he's kind of forced to do it. So I was wondering, why is it that we're forced to commit sinful activities? If we want to be Krishna conscious, why can't we just be Krishna conscious and give up sinful life?
Because the senses are force you to not be. As I explained by Kapila-dev, that in the womb, the child aware, it's actually a soul who's fortunate in the womb, becomes aware of his situation, that he's been there many and many times, and that at the present moment in the womb, this is after the body develops to a certain point, becomes conscious of his situation. And he has a remembrance at that time of many of his births. And he also has a remembrance of how traumatic it is to be born. As described there by Kapila-dev to his mother, and it was also recounted by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to his mother as well, that the living entity, when he comes out of the birth channel, becomes absorbed in the material world. Now, it's explained how the senses are internalized when the baby's still within the womb. But the Hamsavatar, 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, speaking to the Kumaras, says that as soon as the child comes out of the womb, then the senses and the sense objects are connected automatically. The way the word used there is embedded. So the sense objects are embedded within the senses. It's not that they have to find their sense objects, they're already there. Just like if you see a little baby, as soon as he comes out, he immediately goes for the breast, because they're interconnected. So that interconnectedness with the material nature is very difficult to overcome. But it can be overcome by intervention, because ultimately, asango hyayam purushaha, we really have nothing to do with the material nature at all. And with the intervention of devotional service, the association of devotees, and a process, one can extricate oneself from that interconnectedness with the material nature and take up one's original consciousness. So you can just be Krishna conscious, but it requires using your free will. And the free will is more expansive when one's in the mode of goodness. Yesham tvantakatam papam jananam punyakarmanam te dvandva mohanir mukta vajanti mam dradavrta. And therefore, some start off, even though there's an intervention, they require longer time for purification. Another question or reflection? Yes.
One of the verses also, it quoted like Mahaprabhu was praying, and at the end it said that there is no way I am still myself. If you kindly pick me up and fix me as one of the particle dust at your lotus feet, that will save me. I really like that, because it's saying how we're suffering a lot and how we keep taking birth, and unless we don't get help from Guru and Gauranga, then it will be really hard to get out of this material body.
Very nice observation. Thanks for picking that verse, Sachi. Excellent. Couple more? Yes. 1, 2, 3.
Hare Krishna.
Here too.
This is really profound, this sentence that there are many witnesses, including the sun, fire, sky, air, moon, demigods, evening, day, night, directions, water, land, and the super soul himself. So no way whatever we are doing, we can think that, oh, I've done it, but there's always someone who's witnessing, and always something, everything is getting recorded. So anything that happens to me, or however my life is, it is my own doing. And it is, as in the past or in future, everything will be recorded as well. And another thing that is mentioned, that we are the only one, like my life, I have to swim myself to go up to the shore. And the only one who can help me is Krishna. So I can make big, big group, or I can make friends. I might fight to take my loneliness away. But the only friend, the real friend, is Krishna. So I need to remember that.
Nice reflection. I see around our neighborhood, people put up signs with the image of a camera, and it says, "Smile, you're being recorded." Because it dissuades people. Even if there's no camera there, you look around, it's like, well, maybe there is one. So there's a sense of that in these statements. Like, you mean everything's recorded? I thought I was anonymous here, but not so much. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for this wonderful nectar. Again, coming back to the verse that the Mataji was mentioning there, could you just confirm me that this verse from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, was this from Sharanagati?
The song, which verse? Well, she was quoting from the Shikshashtaka, Ainanda Tanuja
Yes,
Kinkaram.
it was followed by a verse from Bhaktivinoda Thakur.
Then there was a song quoted from there, from the Gitavali, which Jiv Krishna das e bishas koleto ordukonai. That one.
Yes.
And then the other one, it says, Miche maya boshe jacho beshe gacho habudububai. I always relished that phraseology. The habudubu is onomatopoeic for drowning. It's the sound of bubbles coming up. Habudubu, habudubu, habudubu. It's sweet language, Bengali. So he says you're drowning there and you can't get out unless you surrender to Krishna. Okay, you're 3, you're 4.
Sorry, I just want to mention there are a couple of chairs still empty, or 3 chairs I can see, so please come forward and say thank you so much for your time.
Maharaj, I had a question. This Prabhupada said that these books should be heard and discussed and applied in practical life. So I was wondering how to apply something we heard in text 49 in the purport, where Prabhupada says that somehow and there's a paragraph leading up to it, but he concludes by saying somehow one must be enlightened about past, present, and future. How do we apply that? Like, it's basically saying we should know about our past or future.
Well, Prabhupada alluded to it there, or the verse mentions that by deduction you can see what your past was. For instance, you have present springtime, you've seen many springtimes, you know springtime's coming at a certain time. I mean, minus global warming and all that, climate change. And so you can also deduce that they were there in the past as well. And so it's in a very general sense that one can take that. And we also are treated in the Srimad Bhagavatam to a view of those who go through various lifetimes. We can also deduce from that the ways in which we've gone through various lifetimes. For instance, we have the story of Bharat Maharaj, who becomes absorbed at the end of his life in a deer, takes birth as a deer, starts practicing Ashtanga yoga as a deer, takes birth as Jad Bharat, and so forth. So we can trace that. There are some who remember their past lives and it's extremely disorienting. And mercifully, Krishna doesn't expose us to all of that. He helps us allows us to compartmentalize this one life so that we're not neurotic constantly. Maybe like those children who at a certain period in their life remember their past life. These are scientifically observed by a department. There are professors at the University of Virginia. It's a funded department to study this phenomenon, and there are several books about it. And the whole family becomes upset. It's like, what do you mean? Where's my other mother? I'm your only mother. So by deduction, we can understand that, and if Krishna wants to reveal something to us, other information that's important, then that's also possible. That Krishna or sages, for some purpose, can show us something, but it's through hearing from Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the way that we can overcome all of the psychological anomalies that we experience in the world. There are three that Krishna particularly mentions that cover categorically all the other kinds of psychological anomalies that we have that keep us in the material world. And that's in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says, Vita raga vaya krodha manmaya mamupashrita bahavo jnana tapasa putamad bhavamagataha. And that is, there's these three: raga, which is irrational attachment to the material world; bhaya, which is fear of our personhood; and krodha, which means intellectual despair. We become angry because, as the deconstructionists say, well, there is no ultimate truth. It's all in process, and you can never come to the end of it. Unlike what the meaning of Vedanta, which means there is an ultimate end. But people lose faith in that, and then they become angry, krodha. Okay, so shall we hear a little more? Oh, you had one. Last one.
Is that okay?
Of course.
Thank you, Maharaj, for taking this initiative to read the Bhagavatam. I can see a large variety of individuals here who are so interested. My reflection was that time and again, the Bhagavatam gives information which is absolutely amazing, very direct, and maybe to some people very painful. Because when you read all these verses and the purpose that Srila Prabhupada has given, I feel any sane man with a little bit of intelligence will be able to understand the gravity of the situation, which is that they are engrossed in sense gratification in a human body, which is meant for something much higher than what they are presently doing. So, thank you for taking the initiative.
Thank you for being here. It's 50-50. So let's try a few more verses. Everyone okay? Happy?
Yes.
We're just here associating with Prabhupada. Text 55. Since the living entity is associated with material nature, he is in an awkward position. But if in the human form of life he is taught how to associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his devotee, this position can be overcome. Purport: the word prakriti means material nature, and purusha may also refer to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one wants to continue his association with prakriti, the female energy of Krishna, and be separated from Krishna by the illusion that he is able to enjoy prakriti, he must continue in his conditional life. If he changes his consciousness, however, and associates with the Supreme Original Person, Purusham Shashvatam, or with his associates, he can get out of the entanglement of material nature. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tattvataha. One must simply understand the Supreme Person, Krishna, in terms of his form, name, activities, and pastimes. This will keep one always in the association of Krishna. Tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mam eti sorjana. Thus, after giving up his gross material body, one accepts not another gross body, but a spiritual body in which to return home back to Godhead. Thus one ends the tribulation caused by his association with the material energy. In summary, the living entity is an eternal servant of God, but he comes to the material world and is bound by material conditions because of a desire to lord it over matter. Liberation means giving up this false consciousness and reviving one's original service to the Lord. This return to one's original life is called mukti, as confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam, muktir hitvayata rupam svarupena vyavastiti. Just a comment about changing bodies and attaining a spiritual body. Today, Premagni accepted second initiation, and in the discussion we had just before her initiation, we talked about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's conversation with Haridas Thakur and Sanatana Goswami, who were rooming together in Jagannath Puri. And in that discussion, which arose partly because of Sanatana Goswami's condition of his sores on his body because of the disease he had, and his aversion to having Mahaprabhu embrace him over and over again and have that exposed part, touch the body of the Lord. And in that context, without all the details, Mahaprabhu had given several verses. One of them that was appropriate today was Diksha Kali Bhakta Kari Atma Samarpan She Kali Krishna Tari Kari Atma Sam. And that's when one surrenders to Krishna through Diksha, then Krishna says, Tari Atma Sam. That person comes into the same category as me. And in that section, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then tells Sanatana and Haridas Thakur that when one surrenders to Krishna, one no longer has a material body. You don't have a siddha deha, the eternal body that you'll have in the spiritual world, but he mentions that you have a sadhaka deha, a practitioner's body. It's no longer dedicated to the material world, it's fully dedicated to the spiritual world and based on iha yasya harir dasya karmana manasa gira nikilapyasya bastastu jivan muktasu ichte. Not only is the person liberated even iha, while in the body, but also by the principle Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita, Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir, Ramagnau Brahmanohutam, Brahmaiva Tenagantavya, Brahmakarma Samadhina. That is that whatever material thing you engage in his service transforms into something spiritual. It reverts to its original nature, which is that it's spiritual, not material anymore. I'll continue. 57. In the beginning, this Brahmana named Ajamil studied all the Vedic literatures. He was a reservoir of good character, good conduct, and good qualities. Firmly established in executing all the Vedic injunctions, he was very mild and gentle, and he kept his mind and senses under control. Furthermore, he was always truthful. He knew how to chant the Vedic mantras, and he was also very pure. Ajamil was very respectful to his spiritual master, the fire god, guests, and the elderly members of his household. Indeed, he was free from false prestige. He was upright, benevolent to all living entities, and well-behaved. He would never speak nonsense or envy anyone. Purport. The order carriers of Yamaraj, the Yamadutas, are explaining the factual position of piety and impiety and how a living entity is entangled in this material world. Describing the history of Ajamil's life, the Yamadutas relate that in the beginning he was a learned scholar of the Vedic literature. He was well behaved, neat and clean, and very kind to everyone. In fact, he had all good qualities. In other words, he was like a perfect Brahmana. A Brahmana is expected to be perfectly pious, to follow all the regulative principles, and to have all good qualities. The symptoms of piety are explained in these verses. Srila Viraghava Acharya comments that Dhrita Vrata means Dhritam Vratam Sri Sangha Rahitas Yatmaka Brahmacharya Rupam. In other words, Ajamil followed the rules and regulations of celibacy as a perfect brahmachari and was very soft-hearted, truthful, clean, and pure. How he fell down in spite of all these qualities and thus came to be threatened with punishment by Yamaraj will be described in the following verses, 59 and 58 through 60. Once this Brahman Ajamil, following the order of his father, went to the forest to collect fruit, flowers, and 2 kinds of grass called simit and kusha. On the way home, he came upon a Shudra, a very lusty 4th-class man who was shamelessly embracing and kissing a prostitute. The Shudra was smiling, singing, and enjoying as if this were proper behavior. Both the Shudra and the prostitute were drunk. The prostitute's eyes were rolling in intoxication, and her dress had become loose. Such was the condition in which Ajamil saw them. Purport. While traveling along the public way, Ajamil came upon a fourth-class man and a prostitute who are vividly described here. Drunkenness was sometimes manifested even in bygone ages, although not very frequently. In this age of Kali, however, such sin is to be seen everywhere, for people all over the world have become shameless. Long ago, when he saw the scene of the drunken Shudra and the prostitute, Ajamil, who is a perfect brahmachari, was affected. Nowadays, such sin is visible in so many places, and we must consider the position of a brahmachari student who sees such behavior. For such a brahmachari to remain steady is very difficult unless he is extremely strong in following the regulative principles. Nevertheless, if one takes to Krishna consciousness very seriously, he can withstand the provocation created by sin. In our Krishna consciousness movement, we prohibit illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling. In Kali Yuga, a drunk, half-naked woman embracing a drunk man is a very common sight, especially in the Western countries, and restraining oneself after seeing such things is very difficult. Nevertheless, if by the grace of Krishna, one adheres to the regulative principles and chants the Hare Krishna mantra, Krishna will certainly protect him. Indeed, Krishna says that his devotee is never vanquished. Kaunteya pratidanihi name bhaktyā pranashyati. Therefore, all the disciples practicing Krishna consciousness should obediently follow the regulative principles and remain fixed in chanting the holy name of the Lord. Then there need be no fear. Otherwise, one's position is very dangerous, especially in this Kali Yuga. Text number 61. The Shudra, his arm decorated with turmeric powder, was embracing the prostitute. When Ajamil saw her, the dormant lusty desires in his heart awakened, and in an illusion he fell under their control. Purport. It is said that if one's body is smeared with turmeric, it attracts the lusty desires of the opposite sex. The word kama liptena indicates that the Shudra was decorated with turmeric smeared on his body. (62) As far as possible, he patiently tried to remember the instructions of the Shastras, not even to see a woman. With the help of this knowledge and his intellect, he tried to control his lusty desires. But because of the force of Cupid within his heart, he failed to control his mind. Purport. Unless one is very strong in knowledge, patience, and proper bodily, mental, and intellectual behavior, controlling one's lusty desires is extremely difficult. Thus, after seeing a man embracing a young woman and practically doing everything required for sex life, even a fully qualified brahmana, as described above, could not control his lusty desires and restrain himself from pursuing them. Because of the force of materialistic life, to maintain self-control is extremely difficult unless one is specifically under the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through devotional service. 63. In the same way that the sun and moon are eclipsed by a low planet, the Brahmana lost all his good sense. Taking advantage of this situation, he always thought of the prostitute, and within a short time he took her as a servant in his house and abandoned all the regulative principles of a Brahmana. Purport. By speaking this verse, Shukadeva Goswami wants to impress upon the mind of the reader that Ajamil's exalted position as a Brahmana was vanquished by his association with the prostitute, so much so that he forgot all his Brahminical activities. Nevertheless, at the end of his life, by chanting the 4 syllables of the name Narayan, he was saved from the gravest danger of falling down. swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Even a little devotional service can save one from the greatest danger. Devotional service which begins with chanting of the holy name of the Lord is so powerful that even if one falls down from the exalted position of a brahmana through sexual indulgence, he can be saved from all calamities if he somehow or other chants the holy name of the Lord. This is the extraordinary power of the Lord's holy name. Therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, it is advised that one not forget the chanting of the holy name even for a moment. Satatam kirtayantu mam yatantascha drdavrata. There are so many dangers in this material world that one may fall down from an exalted position at any time. Yet, if one keeps himself always pure and steady by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, he will be safe without a doubt. 64. Thus Ajamila began spending whatever money he had inherited from his father to satisfy the prostitute with various material presentations, so that she would remain pleased with him. He gave up all his Brahminical activities to satisfy the prostitute. Purport: there are many instances throughout the world in which even a purified person, being attracted by a prostitute, spends all the money he has inherited. Prostitute hunting is so abominable that the desire for sex with a prostitute can ruin one's character, destroy one's exalted position, and plunder all one's money. Therefore, illicit sex is strictly prohibited. One should be satisfied with his married wife, for even a slight deviation will create havoc. A Krishna-conscious grahastha should always remember this. He should always be satisfied with one wife and be peaceful simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Otherwise, at any moment, he may fall down from his good position as exemplified by the case of Ajamila. Keep going?
Yes.
Okay. 65. Because his intelligence was pierced by the lustful glance of the prostitute, the victimized Brahmana Ajamila engaged in sinful acts in her association. He even gave up the company of his very beautiful young wife, who came from a very respectable Brahmana family. Purport: customarily, everyone is eligible to inherit his father's property, and Ajamila also inherited the money of his father. But what did he do with the money? Instead of engaging the money in the service of Krishna, he engaged it in the service of a prostitute. Therefore, he was condemned and was punishable by Yamaraj. How did this happen? He was victimized by the dangerous, lustful glance of a prostitute. Although born, text number 67, of a Brahmana family, this rascal, bereft of intelligence because of the prostitute's association, earned money somehow or other, regardless of whether properly or improperly, and used it to maintain the prostitute's sons and daughters. This Brahmana irresponsibly spent his long lifetime transgressing all the rules and regulations of the Holy Scriptures, living extravagantly and eating food prepared by a prostitute. Therefore, he is full of sins, he is unclean, and is addicted to forbidden activities. Purport: food prepared by an unclean, sinful man or woman, especially a prostitute, is extremely infectious. Ajamila ate such food, and therefore he was subject to be punished by Yamaraj. 68. This man Ajamila did not undergo atonement. Therefore, because of his sinful life, we must take him into the presence of Yamaraj for punishment. There, according to the extent of his sinful acts, he will be punished and thus purified. Purport: the Vishnu Dutas had forbidden the Yamadutas to take Ajamila to Yamaraj, and therefore the Yamadutas explained that taking such a man to Yamaraj was... The Vishnu Dutas had forbidden the Yamadutas to take Ajamila to Yamaraj, and therefore the Yamadutas explained that taking such a man to Yamaraj was appropriate. Since Ajamila had not undergone atonement for his sinful acts, he was to be taken to Yamaraj to be purified. When a man commits murder, he becomes sinful, and therefore he also must be killed. Otherwise, after death, he must suffer many sinful reactions. Similarly, punishment by Yamaraj is a process of purification for the most abominable sinful persons. Therefore, the Yamadutas requested the Vishnudutas not to obstruct their taking Ajamila to Yamaraj. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 6th canto, 1st chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The History and Life of Ajamila. Bravo! Bravissimo! Sadhu, sadhu! Hello, hello! Hari, hari! So let's have some reflections or questions. Yes, Prabhu. What happened to that microphone? We sold it for tea biscuits.
Hare Krishna. You mentioned before that the different stages of the body goes through as a devotee, like sañjātayā or bibhraty, and then we go through the leap of Jivan Mukta Sauchati, while advancing in Krishna consciousness, we can achieve liberation within this material body. It made me thinking, I'm puzzled. As we know, according to everybody, activities or vicissitudes in life we achieve, we go through birth, old age, disease and death in this material world. But in Brahmaloka or Satyaloka, it says there is only birth and death. There is no disease and old age. In the spiritual world, where the siddha, those who have eternal freedom from the material body, there is no birth, old age, disease and death. Now my question is, as a devotee, practitioner, and we achieve the Jivan Mukta Sauchati, purified and liberated. But at the time of death, how do we appear? That leap of transfer, how does it take place into the spiritual world of Vaikuntha Loka, Krishna Loka? If there is no birth, old age, disease and death there, do we just pop up?
Do we just what?
Pop out. We jump after. How do we become manifested into the spiritual world or back home, back to Godhead, if there is no birth? So what is the beginning there? Do we have a mom and daddy?
Understand.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we have evidence from Bhagavatam when Gopakumar goes back to Goloka Vrindavan after his circuitous route through all the universes and layers of the universe. He's transferred from Vrindavan, Bhoma Vrindavan, to Goloka Vrindavan, and he assumes his spiritual body there. And then it's not that he takes birth there, but he's transferred there, and he meets Krishna in the spiritual world. That scene where he's looking for the home of Nanda Maharaj, and then he realizes, because he's not getting very clear directions from anybody, that they're actually the narrator of the story, Sanatana Goswami, explains how in the voice of Sanatana Goswami, and gives this narration about how the residents there are stunned because Krishna's away for the day herding cows. And until he comes back in the evening, then everyone comes back to life. And that's the time when Gopakumar meets Krishna. Krishna comes to the clearing in the forest. Dust of the cows has made this sky turn dark, actually. But Krishna comes out first in the clearing in the forest and sees Gopakumar and runs to him and embraces him. And then Krishna, out of ecstasy for seeing his devotee there in the spiritual world, faints. And he's fainted and he's on the ground, and tears are coming from his eyes, so much so that the ground becomes muddied. And Gopakumar's a little stunned. Balaram comes and gives him indication about it, to take care. He's cleaning the body of Krishna, and Krishna comes back to his external consciousness and embraces Gopakumar and says, now we'll never be separated. So there's that. There's also description of, as Prabhupada, he gives a brief explanation of how our trajectory back to Godhead includes training. So one may take up the process of devotional service and then in the next life take birth in the material universe in a place where Krishna is performing his pastimes. And one would take birth, for instance, from the womb of a gopi there, and then be trained in the pastimes of Krishna in this universe to be prepared to go back to Godhead. It's not stereotype, and evidence for that we find even in the second canto of the Bhagavatam, where Shukadeva is describing the soul going back to Godhead, and there are various routes going back to Godhead. Two of them mentioned there is the direct route and the scenic route. Do you have that here in UK, also in America? If somebody makes a wrong turn and they go the long way instead, it's the scenic route. So some, Prabhupada explains, want to see where they were in the material world and observe on their way back to Godhead the various planetary systems, and oh yeah, I remember that place. And others go directly back. And of course we also have this story of Dhruva Maharaj. When he goes back to Godhead, they swing by and pick him up in an airplane. And he said, what about my mom? Says, she's in the other one right there. So the accounts of how the devotees go back to Godhead, and also some eternal associates of the Lord who are playing a part here in the material world go back to Godhead in their self-same bodies. Although Bhagavatam also explains how it's an effulgent body. It can become immediately effulgent in that way. So not stereotyped, and there's no birth in the spiritual world, but one gets transferred there either by conveyance or other ways. I mean, Krishna has ways of transferring his devotees. For instance, in Mathura, after Mathura was Jarasandha attacked for the 17th time, Krishna transferred all of his devotees from Mathura to Dwarka while they were sleeping. They just woke up in golden palaces in the middle of the ocean. So he can transport us in whichever way. But there are some examples of that, of various ways. Okay? Thank you. Okay, 1, 2. Right here.
Right. In text 56 and 57, some qualities of Ajamila were mentioned, and two things specifically which struck me were, one is that he was free from false prestige, and the other one, he did not envy anyone. And I was wondering that I struggle with these every day, every single day. So in that sense, Ajamila is a lot more senior than me, So I'm even more vulnerable to provocation. And Prabhupada gives the solution is, as we should keep ourselves steady by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. But the problem is I don't have that much taste for the holy name. So what's the solution?
Well, in the beginning, Prabhupada writes in a purport that you must chant officially. In the beginning, you won't have taste, and because of what Rupa Goswami says, said Krishna nama charitari si tapta vidyapito patapta rasanasyana rochikadu pavarat anudilam kalasaiva justa swadvi kramad bhavati tad garamulahantri. He compares it to jaundice. When you have jaundice, the curative is sugarcane juice, but it tastes terrible. But if you keep taking it as medicine, then it clears your disease and you start to taste that. So in the beginning, Prabhupada says, you have to understand that this is the medicine. It's already vetted. Etam nirvidyamananam ichatam akato bhayam yoginam nripanirnitam harirnamanukirtanam. Nirnitam means, Shukadev says this, it's good for everybody, he said. This medicine works for anybody, and he gives some examples. If you're a yogi, you're a king, you're a regular person on the street. Nirdita means, don't worry, everybody agrees. This is the process. So you have to use your intelligence to understand. Doctor prescribes something. When you go to the doctor, you don't know what's in it. They probably don't either. But it's been tested, double-blind studies. The stuff works. Just take it. The doctor's trained. And so you take it in that way as medicine, and gradually then your taste awakens. Okay, yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I have a dilemma. I hope you can help me with the dilemma that I have. On the one hand, I'm getting some advice from a very, very senior personality in our movement who's not to take any shiksha outside of ISKCON. And on the other hand, I am attracted to a copy of Jayadharma from Swami Narayan Maharaj. Can you help me with this?
Well, I'm working with Devamrita Swami, and we're bringing out all of the Goswami literatures through the BBT. And Jayadharma is already done. It's just not released yet. Next book to come out is the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu in 5 volumes. It was translated by Bhanu Maharaj. The commentary is already there by Prabhupada, because he started a comment. I'm getting into a lot of other detail, but I'll come back. There's commentary he made for the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu before he summarized it in the Nectar Ocean. That's there. There's a little bit, not a lot. But then it's extensive commentary by Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And all that's there. Then Jayadharma, done. It's in the can, ready to come out. So you don't have to worry, and everyone will be happy. All right?
Thank you.
You're welcome. And just regarding the plethora of books that are available here, there, and everywhere, if you go to Ras Bihari Lal's, it's the biggest little bookstore in the world, and millions of books. I refer you to a conversation that took place on a morning walk circa 1972 with Prabhupada when devotees first came to India by Prabhupada's invitation to start the movement here, in India. They discovered there were copies of other books around, and so they would collect them. And then the temple president at the time said, you can't read these. And then, as usual, they brought the matter to Prabhupada in his morning walk. Like, that's where he'd hold court. And so, the case was made. Prabhupada, we have these books, previous acharyas. Temple president said, you told him we can't read them. Prabhupada said, I have said? No. He said, you should read the books of the previous acharyas, but he said, first assimilate what you have. So principle, important. There are so many books, there's a Vaishnava canon we should be aware of. We should know What is the difference between the Vidagdha Madhava, Lita Madhava, Ujjvala Nilamani, and so forth. But have you read the Chaitanya Charitamrita extensively? And for that matter, how about the Srimad Bhagavatam or even Bhagavad Gita? How about Sri Ishopanishad? There's a tendency to, eyes are bigger than the stomach. You collect all these books, and Prabhupada commented another time, he said, I've noticed that my disciples are collecting stacks of austere books. He said, but what about chanting Hare Krishna also? And then he's also made statements about here's 5 books, and then he names Nectar of Devotion, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhagavad Gita, and what else? Okay, whatever you all said. And he said, do those completely. My experience is, it's really hard to assimilate the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I mean, I know devotees are studying it for years, and their IQs are off the chart, but for the more they read it, the more they say, okay, I got to do this again. Even one chapter, again and again, reading the chapter and going in deeply within it. So assimilate what you have. That's an important instruction Prabhupada gave. Was there one more on this side? Divinam Prabhu.
Maharaj, thank you so much for the readings. I was just contemplating and thinking that if you could say a few words about what is it so special about, we hear like the Bhagavatam says, Satam Prasango Mama Viriyasam Mitho. So it's mentioned there that, in the association of the devotees, the description and the activities of the Lord are very pleasing to the ear and the heart. But I wonder, what is it so special about, I can just clearly feel the difference between sitting in my room and reading alone versus being here in your association and so many other Vaishnavas. Could you just say a bit more about what is that which pleases to the heart? What happens exactly? Because it's very fascinating and it's very, very uplifting.
Is it because it pleases Krishna? In fact, there's a verse from Bhagavatam that explains the phenomena. It says, smarantaḥ smārayantaś Mitho ghaugha-haraṁ harim bhaktyā sañjātayā bhaktyā. What's the last line, Pandits? Somebody can look it up. It says, smarantaḥ smārayantaś Mitho ghaugha-haraṁ harim. So the first line says this. It says, those who come together to remember Krishna and to cause other people to remember Krishna. So smarantaḥ, smārayantaś cha, these two. That Mitho means to meet together. Mitho ghaugha-haraṁ harim. In that assembly, with reminding one another and remembering Krishna together, so then ghaugha-haraṁ harim means that Agha, agha-ogha. Agha means sin, like Aghāsura. And aghaugha-haraṁ means that huge warehouses of horrible sinful reactions are destroyed in that assembly when you're reminding one another and speaking about Krishna. And why is it? And at the last, what's the last line? Somebody give it to me. Bibhraty utpulakāṁ tanum. It says that, thank you. It says then, in that assembly, by reminding others and remembering Krishna together, because it pleases Krishna, then your body starts to feel ecstasy. Your sins are all destroyed, and you start to feel ecstasy, and your body erupts with, the skin and the hair stand on end and things like that. What's more, and the third line says, bhaktyā sañjātayā bhaktyā. You transfer yourself from sadhana bhakti to rag bhakti. You move from one kind of bhakti to another. How? In the assembly, reminding one another. So it's the most recommended of all processes to get together like this. And you see your Bhagavatam, it'll solve all problems, and all the other benefits are mentioned. Or I just mentioned them. Did you have a point?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
So I'm wondering, because he was so rabbinical, Ajamil, and he was following the principles very, very strong.
It's a 1 inch rule. You got to keep it 1 inch from your chin. Okay.
So Ajamil is very rabbinical, and we can see the qualities laid out by detail. And I'm wondering if he's following everything so strongly, then why was it that he fell down? Was it because he was showing us the example? Or was it an external force or something he could have done better?
One of the main points here is the superiority of bhakti. And as Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur points out in this chapter, he couldn't be saved by karma kanda or jnana kanda, which he had plenty of. But incidentally, he was saved by bhakti. Because, and that's like, he fooled around and scored and got a triple double. You know, it's like he just said Narayan accidentally, innocently, and this chapter is proving the Lord's protection, and it's showing the superiority of bhakti over jnana and karma. So he had all those, originally that's what he was fortified with as a Brahmana. He had all jnana, and he was refined. But that's not, in the list of 26 qualities of a Vaishnava, 25 of them are expendable. One of them is necessary, which is that one has a sincere desire to surrender to Krishna. If you have that one, it makes up for all the other ones. Rupa Goswami says that. So that's what this is proving, is the power of bhakti, and the power of bhakti especially by chanting the Lord's holy name. And once one has vishaya vinivartante niraharasiddhina rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishya nivartate, if one has the higher taste that he attains from that, then one doesn't fall back down again. Did it answer your question? Oh, good. We're here till 8 o'clock, right? Or 8:30, 9? Yes, please, all the way to the back.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
In the previous verses that we were reading, we heard how in this ocean of material existence we should only take shelter of Krishna. But now in the Prabhupada was explaining how by training to associate with the devotees, we go back to Krishna as well. So my question is there any difference between surrendering to the devotees of Krishna and Krishna himself?
Yeah, it's more important to surrender to the devotees of Krishna. I gave some evidence of that in the class, whenever that was, yesterday morning. I quoted from Bhagavatam, in which Krishna says that worshipping the devotees is more important than worshipping me. And this is the principle Prabhupada mentions, love me, love my dog. Aradhanam sarvesham Vishnu aradhanam param. Tasmat parataram devi tadyanam samarchana. That what's most dear to the Lord, or the most worshipable object, is the devotee of Krishna. Because I think I also quoted Sadhavo hridayo mayam, sadhunam hridayam tvaham, mananyatena jananti, naham tebyo manangapi. Krishna says, the pure devotee is in my heart, and I am in the heart of the pure devotee. Pure devotee only knows me, and I only know the pure devotee. So that principle I also quoted from Prahlad Maharaj. He's standing right in front of Nrsingadev offering prayers. And then he says, Evam janam nipatitam prabhabahi kupe kama vikamam ariyam anunam prapatam prasanga kritvatmasat shurarshina bhagavan grihito soham katan nu vishujaya tava britya sevam. He's before the Lord and he says, please let me always be the servant of your servant. So that principle is a mainstay of the devotee's life, because when you worship the devotee, then Krishna is most pleased. Okay?
Thanks. I was thinking, Maharaj, that...
Madbhakta puja vyadika. I'm sorry, I couldn't remember the verse one I was saying. But that was the first one. Krishna says, Madbhakta, my bhakta, puja vyadika. That's the best kind of worship, to worship my devotee. Okay, please go ahead.
I was saying that I was thinking a couple of days ago we were looking at the definition of glance, and we then said that glance is consciousness itself, and I was thinking here how the consciousness through glance also bounces back to us, what we are looking at. And as you say, that where attention goes, energy flows. So we need to be conscious about where the attention is going. And just extrapolating from this specific example, it can be anything. Could be iPhone, could be prasadam, could be, as the person says, chili paneer. And so it's basically senses can get drawn to any of that. And then I was thinking how to remediate that, and Krishna says that controlling the mind is by detachment and practice. So how do we practice detachment?
By attaching oneself to Krishna. By the practice of becoming attached to Krishna, by seeing his forms. We practice ajata ruchi, sadhana bhakti. It means before we have taste, we're practicing a kind of raghunuga bhakti, because what we're doing is what the Goswamis did: worship the form of the Lord, the name of the Lord, hear the Srimad Bhagavatam. But we're doing it before we have taste. But it leads to that. And once we have a taste, then we're automatically detached from other things. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janaya Yashavairagyam Yanam Chayadahaitukam. By worshiping Krishna directly, then one naturally gets knowledge and detachment from the world. Of course, in the beginning, one should use one's intelligence, Krishna says. Evam buddhi param buddhva samstabhyatmanamatmana jahishatra mahabaho kama rupam darasadam. So in the beginning, because Arjuna wants to know, how do you get free from lust? And Krishna says, first use your intelligence. So before you have that taste, you have to use your intelligence to understand that there's a lower self and a higher self, and you have to use the higher self to conquer the lower self. But ultimately, we become detached from the material world when we have something better. When we have better association, then we don't want the other association. And when you have attachment to Krishna, then you're automatically detached from all other things. Yes? Uh-oh. We're experiencing some attrition. So I think we should wrap up with a bhajan.
Yes.
May we?
Yes.
You're all amazing. Simply amazing. The taste you have for hearing and chanting, and it's just overwhelmingly beautiful. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. Isn't it, you want to just sit for 1 second, I won't talk long, that we're able to associate so intimately with Prabhupada by coming together and just hearing from his books. And he specifically mentions again and again that this was his intention for us to have this opportunity together to hear from him directly. You can't get any more direct than hearing from an author who puts his emotional ecstasies, with his own words, into a book and asks us to read. So this is the greatest of all edifying forces, is to come together, as Divyanam Prabhu noted, and in groups. It's good to read alone too, but this is the best, in my opinion. And to hear, discuss, and everything can be overcome, including the material world, by this process of hearing and chanting from Prabhupada's books and being in the association of devotees. So thank you very much for arranging this. We'll be back tomorrow night for round 2, right? Even if there's a big storm, we're still coming.
This is Vaisesika Prabhu ki! Srila Prabhupada ki! How was the reading session? How were the bhajans? So we'll meet again tomorrow at 5:55 p.m. right here in this room. We are ending a little early tomorrow because we have another program with School of Bhakti. So we'll end at 7:20. So we'll start a little early, 5 minutes early. We'll start at 5:55 p.m. So please be here on time. Because tomorrow evening is our last opportunity for this visit to read Srimad Bhagavatam with Maharaj and Mother Nirakula. As on Wednesday morning, they are flying back, Krishna willing, if the planes are still flying to America, which they are. As much as my daughter is wishing they don't, but they are flying. So they will be flying. But a good thing is they'll be back again soon in the month of March. And I almost feel we should just not do 3 things. Have prasadam, that's important. Read Bhagavatam, go out, distribute books, come back, read Bhagavatam, go out and distribute books and have prasadam. Right? Do you think it's a good program? Yeah. I think we should just do that. Next time when Maharaj comes, only 3 things. Krishna Prasad, holy name, go out, come back, go out, come back. We should just do these 2 programs. Do you think it's a good idea?
Haribol!
So dear devotees, thank you so much for coming tonight. And yeah, as many of you come from far, I want to just quickly thank few devotees here. Vignesh Prabhu, who came on a harmonium on a very short notice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And shorter than that notice was a 5-minute notice to Rishabh.
Yay! Rishabh.
I called him when I was outside his house. I said, get out here in 2 minutes. In 2 minutes he was out. Thank you, Rishabh, for coming this evening. And thank you to everybody who came for the reading. So we'll see you tomorrow at 5:55.
Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Gaurnitai, Shri Radhika Kulananda, Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman. If you so desire, please instill in our hearts a desire to hear Krishna Katha, especially from Srila Prabhupada's books, every day in ever-increasing amounts. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part. Please unmute and say Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Manchakalpadrishya kripasnave vishapatitanam bhavanibhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha anantakoti vaishnaviniki jai.